The mafia boss returns home unexpectedly and catches the maid doing the absolute forbidden thing with his twin children. Dominic Russo froze at the threshold of his fortress-like mansion when the sound of piano echoed from the living room, a place where he had banned all music after Isabella's bloody death. His 10-year-old twins sat side by side. Luca, the autistic boy who hadn't spoken a single word in 2 years, was now softly singing along to the melody, his brown eyes glowing with a life force Dominic thought had died with their mother. Beside him, Sophia, the limping girl with her disabled legs, swayed to the rhythm, her radiant smile erasing the deep-seated insecurity etched on her small face. And seated at the piano keys was Emma Hayes, the 27-year-old housekeeper whose blue eyes once held too much pain, now smiling like sunshine after rain, her thin fingers still bearing calluses from 3 previous jobs now gently playing a miraculous melody. The simple black uniform remained intact, but in this moment, she was no longer a servant living in fear, but a mother, a teacher, the one who ignited the flame of life in this mansion as cold as a tomb. "Daddy, you're home early?" Sophia looked up, her voice mixed with surprise and worry, because for 2 years, this man only appeared like a ghost arriving when they slept, leaving before they woke. Dominic Russo, the man who made Chicago's entire underworld tremble, stood motionless like a statue, his hand still gripping the gun in his vest pocket, his mind battling between 2 extremes. Should he drag this woman out of the house immediately for daring to violate his strictest order, or should he kneel down and thank her for doing what he, an all-powerful mafia boss with countless lives on his hands, had been completely powerless to do for 2 whole years? Give his 2 children a reason to live again. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before Dominic's jaw tightened, his voice emerging cold and sharp as a blade cutting through the warmth that had filled the room moments before. "Office. Now." Emma's hands froze above the piano keys. The children's faces drained of color. Sophia's smile vanished, replaced by the familiar fear that had haunted her eyes for 2 years, while Luca's brief spark of life flickered and dimmed like a candle in the wind. "Daddy, please don't," Sophia began, but Dominic's raised hand silenced her without a word. He didn't look at his children. Couldn't. Because if he did, he might see the hope dying in their eyes, and that would shatter whatever resolve he had left. Emma stood slowly, her legs trembling beneath the simple black uniform. She touched Sophia's shoulder gently, whispered something that made the girl nod reluctantly, then followed Dominic down the marble hallway. Each step echoed through the cavernous mansion like a countdown to execution. The office door slammed shut behind them with a finality that made Emma flinch. Dominic moved to the window, his back to her, hands clasped behind him in a pose that had intimidated countless men into submission or silence. The Chicago skyline glittered beyond the bulletproof glass, indifferent to the storm brewing in this fortress of stone and secrets. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" His voice was dangerously quiet, the kind of calm that preceded violence in his world. Emma's chin lifted despite the fear coursing through her veins. "I gave 2 traumatized children a reason to smile again." He whirled around, eyes blazing with fury that made her step back involuntarily. "You violated a direct order. Music is forbidden in this house. I made that explicitly clear when I hired you 3 months ago. And I made it clear that I would care for your children, Mr. Russo, not abandon them to die slowly in their grief while you hide in your empire of blood and money." The words hung in the air like a grenade, with the pin pulled. No one spoke to Dominic Russo this way. No one. Men twice her size had begged for mercy for lesser offenses, but Emma Hayes stood her ground, blue eyes blazing with a fire born not of recklessness, but of something far more dangerous, righteous conviction. "You have no idea what you're talking about," Dominic said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "Pack your things. You're fired." "Good." Emma's response shocked him. "Fire me. Send me away." But when Luca stops speaking again, and he will when Sophia locks herself in her room and refuses to eat, and she will when you finally realize that you've destroyed the only chance they had at healing. Remember this moment. Remember that you chose your pain over their hope. "My pain?" Dominic's control shattered like glass. He swept his arm across the desk, sending papers and a crystal tumbler crashing to the floor. "My wife was blown to pieces buying me a birthday present. I held her hand while she died on that sidewalk, her blood soaking into the concrete, her last words begging me to protect our children. And I failed. I failed because she was out there because of me, because loving me made her a target." His voice cracked, and for the first time since Isabella's death, Dominic Russo, the man who controlled half of Chicago's underworld, allowed tears to streak down his scarred face. Music was her world. "Every piano note in this house reminds me that she's gone, that I killed her by being what I am." Emma's anger dissolved into something softer, more devastating. You didn't kill her, Mr. Russo, but you're killing your children every day. You choose guilt over love. Her voice gentled. I understand loss. My fiancé, Michael, died 1 week before our wedding. I was 19 and 4 months pregnant. The shock caused me to miscarry. I lost them both within a month, the man I loved and the baby I'd never meet. Dominic's rage faltered, replaced by something uncomfortably close to recognition. Then you should understand why I can't. I understand that grief is a hungry beast that devours everything if we let it. Emma interrupted, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. I understand that after Michael died, I wanted to die too, but I also learned that honoring the dead doesn't mean joining them in the grave. Your wife loved music because it brought joy. Would she want that joy erased from her children's lives? The question hit Dominic like a physical blow. He sank into his leather chair, suddenly looking older than his 37 years. The silence stretched between them, filled only by their ragged breathing and the distant hum of the city beyond the windows. Finally, Dominic spoke, his voice hoarse. 1 week. You have 1 week to prove that this, music therapy or whatever you call it, actually helps them. But if I see any sign that it's making things worse, if either of them shows any distress, you're gone. Understood? Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. And Miss Hayes? Dominic's gray eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that stole her breath. If you ever disobey a direct order again, I won't be this merciful. But as Emma turned to leave, she caught something in his expression that contradicted the threat, a flicker of desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, this broken woman could fix what he'd been too afraid to touch. Emma's hands trembled as she closed the office door behind her, leaning against the solid wood to steady herself. The confrontation had ripped open wounds she'd spent years trying to seal, and now memories flooded back with the force of a dam breaking. She slid down to sit on the cold marble floor of the hallway, wrapping her arms around her knees as the past clawed its way to the surface. 8 years old. That's how old Emma had been when the fire took everything. She could still smell the smoke, still hear her mother's screams from the second floor as flames devoured their small Chicago apartment. Her father had run back inside to save her mother. Neither came out. Emma had stood on the sidewalk in her pink pajamas, watching firefighters pull 2 body bags from the wreckage, and something inside her had frozen that night, something that would take 19 years to thaw. The group home came next. Then the foster families, 3 of them in 4 years, each placement ending badly until the Hendersons took her in when she was 12. Mr. Henderson seemed kind at first. He smiled too much, touched her shoulder too often, but Mrs. Henderson didn't notice, or maybe she did and looked away. The abuse started 3 months after Emma arrived. Mr. Henderson would come to her room after his wife fell asleep, his whiskey breath hot against her neck as he whispered that this was their secret, that no one would believe her if she told. Emma learned to dissociate, to float somewhere above her body while terrible things happened below. She survived 4 years this way, silent and broken, until the night before her 16th birthday, when she finally found the courage to run. 2 years on Chicago's streets followed. Emma slept in shelters, under bridges, anywhere the predators wouldn't find her. She worked cash jobs, cleaning, dishwashing, anything that didn't require ID she didn't have. She was 18 when she met Michael Torres at the diner where she'd finally gotten legitimate work. Michael was a college student working part-time, with warm brown eyes and a laugh that made Emma remember what safety felt like. He didn't push. He waited 6 months before even holding her hand. When Emma finally told him about the Hendersons, about the scars that mapped her body and soul, Michael had cried and held her and promised that love didn't have to hurt. They dated for a year before Emma discovered she was pregnant. She was 19, terrified, but Michael's joy was infectious. He proposed immediately with a ring he'd saved 3 months to buy. They set the wedding date for the following month, found a tiny apartment they could barely afford, and for the first time since the fire, Emma allowed herself to believe in happy endings. The accident happened 7 days before the wedding. A drunk driver ran a red light, T-boning Michael's car on his way home from his night shift. He died on impact. Emma, 4 months pregnant, received the news at the dress fitting. The trauma triggered premature labor. The baby, a girl, the doctors said, was born too early and too small. She lived for 23 minutes. Emma named her Grace before they took her away. The medical bills crushed her. $85,000 for the emergency procedures, the attempts to save the baby, the psychiatric care after Emma tried to swallow a bottle of pills, another $40,000 for Michael's funeral when his family refused to pay, blaming Emma for distracting him from his studies. $15,000 more in accumulated debt, rent, credit cards, survival, $140,000. an impossible mountain of debt that grew larger each month with interest and late fees. The doctors told her the damage from the miscarriage was permanent. Emma Hayes would never carry a child again. Her body had become a graveyard where nothing could grow. She worked 3 jobs to stay afloat. 5 in the morning until 11, serving coffee to businessmen who didn't see her face. Noon until 5 cleaning office buildings, her hands raw from chemicals. 7 at night until 1 in the morning bartending at a dive where men offered her money for things she refused to name. 4 hours of sleep. Repeat. Day after day after day. The debt barely budged. Then Marco Vitale walked into the coffee shop 3 months ago. A well-dressed man with kind eyes who'd been watching her for weeks. His boss needed a live-in housekeeper and nanny. The pay was $4,500 a month, triple what she made working herself to death. Room and board included. "There's one catch," Marco had said quietly. "My boss is Dominic Russo." Emma knew the name. Everyone in Chicago knew the Russo family. But $4,500 a month could save her. She could pay off the debt in 3 years. She could sleep more than 4 hours. She could stop feeling like she was drowning. "I'll take it," she'd said without hesitation. Now, sitting in the hallway of this fortress mansion, Emma wondered if she'd simply traded one form of survival for another, but then she heard Sophia's laugh drift down from upstairs, tentative and fragile, but real, and she knew the answer. She hadn't come here just to save herself. She'd come to save them all. Emma pushed herself up from the cold marble floor, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. The past was done. Only the next 7 days mattered now. She found Luca and Sophia still sitting by the piano, their small faces etched with worry. "Is Daddy sending you away?" Sophia's voice cracked, her hands gripping the edge of the piano bench until her knuckles turned white. Emma knelt before them, taking their hands in hers. "No, sweetheart. Your father gave me 1 week to show him that music can help you both, so we're going to make every single day count." The first morning began at 9 o'clock sharp. Emma set up the living room like a proper music studio, pulling curtains open to flood the space with sunlight that hadn't touched these walls in 2 years. She positioned Luca's art supplies near the piano where he could draw while listening. "Music and art are sisters," Emma explained softly to Luca, who watched her with cautious eyes. "Sometimes what we can't say with words, we can say with colors and sounds." She started with simple scales, her fingers dancing across the keys. Sophia sat beside her on the bench, mimicking the finger positions. The girl's disabled leg required a modified foot pedal, which Emma had quietly ordered and installed the night before. "I can't reach it properly," Sophia whispered, shame coloring her cheeks. "Then we'll make the music come to you instead of forcing you to reach for it," Emma replied, adjusting the pedal height. "Your difference doesn't make you less, Sophia. It makes you unique." By day 3, something remarkable happened. Luca, who had remained silent even during the confrontation in Dominic's office, began humming along to the melodies. It was barely audible at first, a vibration more than sound, but Emma caught it and her heart soared. She didn't make a big deal of it. Instead, she simply continued playing, letting the music create a safe space where Luca's voice could emerge without pressure or expectation. That afternoon, Emma discovered Luca's drawings scattered across the coffee table. For 2 years, the boy had only used black and gray storm clouds and shadows, darkness reflecting the prison of his grief. But now, tentative strokes of blue appeared in a corner, then yellow. A week ago, Luca's art depicted empty rooms and closed doors. Today, he'd drawn the piano with Emma's hands on the keys, and he'd colored them peach instead of gray. Sophia's transformation was equally profound but more visible. The girl who'd spent 2 years hiding behind furniture, ashamed of her limping gait, began moving differently. Music gave her rhythm, and rhythm gave her confidence. By day 5, she was dancing her own unique dance that accommodated her disability rather than fighting against it. "Look, Miss Emma," Sophia spun with her arms outstretched, her brace glinting in the afternoon light. "I'm making my own choreography." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "You're not just dancing, sweetheart. You're flying." What Emma didn't know was that Dominic watched every moment. In his 3rd-floor office, the forbidden floor, a wall of security monitors displayed every angle of the living room. He'd installed them after Isabella's death, paranoid about protecting what remained of his family. Now he sat before those screens like a man witnessing a resurrection. He watched Emma's patience as Luca struggled with a simple chord progression, her hands gently guiding his without forcing. He saw her celebrate Sophia's small victories, a note held for 4 beats instead of 3, a pirouette completed without stumbling as if they were Olympic triumphs. But what shattered Dominic's carefully constructed walls was the moment on day 6 when Luca finally spoke. Emma was playing Claire de Lune, and Sophia had fallen asleep against her shoulder. Luca sat cross-legged on the floor, a box of colored pencils in his lap, and suddenly he said, "This song sounds like Mommy." 3 words. The first words in 730 days. Through the camera's audio feed, Dominic heard Emma's sharp intake of breath. He watched her hand still on the keys, watched her turn slowly toward Luca. "Your mommy loved this song?" Emma asked gently. Luca nodded, his small voice growing stronger. "She played it on my birthday. She said moonlight was magic, and magic was love." Emma resumed playing, softer now, and Luca continued drawing, this time sketching a woman at a piano, surrounded by silver light. In his office, Dominic Russo, the man who'd ordered executions without flinching, who'd built an empire on fear and violence, pressed his palm against the monitor screen as if he could touch his son through the glass. "Isabella," he whispered to the empty room. "She's giving them back to me." For the first time in 2 years, Dominic allowed himself to feel something other than rage and guilt. It was small and fragile, barely a spark, but it was unmistakably hope. Marco Vitali found Dominic still sitting in the darkened office at midnight, the security monitors casting blue light across his boss's haggard face. A half-empty bottle of scotch sat on the desk untouched for hours, Dominic's hand frozen around the glass. "Boss," Marco said quietly, closing the door. "You haven't moved in 6 hours." Dominic didn't look away from the screens. "Luca spoke today." Marco's eyebrows rose. "The boy spoke?" 3 words. Dominic's voice was raw. 3 words in 2 years. And I wasn't there. I was up here, hiding like a coward, watching through cameras like some kind of ghost haunting my own life. Marco pulled up a chair, settling his large frame into it with a sigh. They'd been friends since childhood, long before the Russo Empire, before the blood and the money. If anyone could speak truth to Dominic Russo, it was this man. "You want to tell me what's really eating at you?" Marco asked. Dominic finally looked away from the monitors, his gray eyes haunted. "It was my birthday, Marco. 2 years ago today. Did you know that?" Marco went still. He knew. Everyone in the organization knew, though no one dared mention it. "Isabella went to buy me a gift," Dominic continued, his voice breaking. "I told her not to. I said I didn't need anything, that I had everything I wanted. But she laughed. You remember that laugh, Marco? Like wind chimes in summer. She said every king deserves a crown on his birthday, even if he thinks he doesn't need one." The memory pulled Dominic under like a riptide. He could see Isabella so clearly, her dark hair twisted into a braid, that yellow sundress she loved despite his protests, that it made her too visible, too memorable. She'd kissed him goodbye, her lips tasting of the coffee they'd shared that morning. "The jeweler was 3 blocks from our old apartment," Dominic said. She was looking at watches in the window. The surveillance footage showed her smiling, pointing at a vintage Rolex she knew I'd hate, but she'd buy anyway just to see me pretend to like it. His hands clenched into fists. Elena Kovac's men planted the device in the trash can outside the shop. Remote detonation. They'd been tracking Isabella for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment when she was alone, unguarded, vulnerable. They called me 30 seconds before they triggered it. Elena herself. She said, "Happy birthday, Dominic. Here's your gift." Marco's jaw tightened, old rage surfacing. They'd hunted Elena's network for months afterward, but she'd disappeared like smoke. "I heard the explosion through the phone," Dominic whispered. "I was 15 minutes away. I ran every red light, abandoned the car in the middle of Michigan Avenue, and ran the last 6 blocks. The smoke was still rising when I got there. The jewelry shop was gone. Just gone. A crater where it used to be." He paused, picking up the scotch glass but not drinking. "I found her in the rubble. She was still alive, Marco. Still conscious. The lower half of her body was..." His voice failed. "She was holding my hand, telling me it was okay, that she loved me, that I had to take care of the twins. She was dying, and she was comforting me. Her last words were, 'Don't let them forget me.' And then she was gone." The silence that followed was thick with grief, 2 years old but fresh as an open wound. "The twins were at school," Dominic continued. "I had to pick them up, had to tell 2 8-year-old children that their mother was dead because someone wanted to hurt me. Luca stopped talking that day. Just stopped. Sophia wouldn't let go of her mother's scarf for 3 months, and I couldn't look at them without seeing Isabella in their faces, without remembering that she died buying me a fucking birthday present." Marco leaned forward. "So you buried yourself in work." "I destroyed Elena's entire operation, burned it to the ground. Then I took over her territories, expanded ours, made the Russo name so feared that no one would ever dare touch my family again." Dominic laughed bitterly. "I worked 20-hour days. Negotiated deals, eliminated rivals, built an empire of fear. I told myself I was protecting Luca and Sofia. But the truth? He finally met Marco's eyes. I was running. From their pain, from mine, from the fact that every time I looked at them, I saw my failure. I couldn't save their mother, so I convinced myself that making money and eliminating threats was the same as being a father. And now? Marco asked. Dominic turned back to the monitors where Emma was tucking Sofia into bed, the girl's arms wrapped around her neck in a trust Dominic hadn't earned in 2 years. Now I realize I've lost 2 years I can never get back. Luca spoke his first words since the funeral today, and I wasn't there to hear them. Sofia is learning to love herself again, and I've missed every step of that journey. A stranger, a housekeeper I hired 3 months ago, has done more for my children than I have in 730 days. Emma's not a stranger, Marco said carefully. She's someone who understands loss. Maybe that's why she can reach them. Dominic's fingers traced the edge of the monitor, showing Luca asleep, clutching a drawing of his mother. I've spent 2 years trying to honor Isabella's memory by becoming harder, colder, more powerful. But she didn't ask me to be powerful. She asked me not to let them forget her. And the only person keeping her memory alive in this house is the woman I almost fired for breaking my rules. He stood abruptly, the decision crystallizing. No more cameras, no more hiding. What are you going to do? Marco asked. Dominic looked at his reflection in the darkened window, a ghost of the man Isabella had loved. I'm going to stop watching my children's lives through screens and start living in them. The next evening, Emma was setting the dining table when she heard footsteps descending the main staircase. She looked up to find Dominic standing at the entrance to the dining room, dressed not in his usual tailored suit but in a simple black sweater and jeans. He looked younger somehow, less like the fearsome mafia boss and more like the man Isabella must have fallen in love with. Mr. Russo, Emma said, surprise evident in her voice. Is everything all right? I'd like to have dinner with my children, Dominic said, his voice uncertain in a way that made him seem almost vulnerable. If that's acceptable. Emma's face softened into a smile. Of course, I'll set another place. She called Luca and Sofia down from their rooms. The children appeared at the top of the stairs, freezing when they saw their father waiting at the table. Sofia's hand found Luca's, their fingers intertwining in mutual anxiety. It's okay, Emma encouraged gently. Your father wants to eat with us tonight. The meal began in suffocating silence. Dominic sat at the head of the table, a position he'd avoided for 2 years because Isabella used to sit at the opposite end, and the empty chair was too painful to face. Now he forced himself to sit there, to claim his place in this family even if he felt like an intruder. Emma had prepared pasta carbonara, and she served each plate with practiced efficiency. Luca and Sofia picked at their food, stealing glances at their father as if he might vanish like smoke if they looked too long. Dominic cleared his throat. The food is good. Another silence. Emma watched the family founder and decided to throw them a lifeline. Sofia learned a new song today, Emma said brightly. Would you like to tell your father about it? Sofia's eyes widened, but she nodded hesitantly. It's called Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Miss Emma says it was in a movie about a girl who went to a magical place. Your mother loved that song, Dominic said, the words escaping before he could stop them. He saw Sofia's face light up with surprise and hunger for more. She used to sing it while cooking dinner. Really? Sofia leaned forward, her shyness momentarily forgotten. Did Mommy sing a lot? Dominic's throat tightened. Every day. She had a terrible voice, couldn't carry a tune to save her life, but she sang anyway because it made her happy. Emma saw the opening and gently pushed it wider. What else did your mother do that made her happy? She collected teacups, Dominic said, the memories flowing now like water through a crack in a dam. Ridiculous, fancy teacups she'd find at antique stores. We have 43 of them in the china cabinet. She never used them, just liked looking at them. Luca, who'd been silent throughout the meal, suddenly spoke. The ones with the flowers? Every head turned toward him. It was only the second time he'd spoken in 2 years, and the sound of his small voice in the dining room made Dominic's chest constrict. Yes, Dominic managed. The ones with the purple flowers were her favorites. Can we see them? Luca asked, his brown eyes so much like Isabella's fixed on his father's face. Of course. After dinner, we'll look at them together. The conversation slowly thawed after that. Emma asked questions that prompted memories, and Dominic found himself talking about Isabella not as a wound to avoid but as a person to remember. He told them about the time Isabella tried to surprise him with a home-cooked Italian meal and nearly burned down the kitchen, about how she couldn't parallel park and would drive around the block 6 times rather than attempt it, about how she'd leave sticky notes with terrible jokes hidden in his briefcase. Sophia giggled at the stories. Even Luca smiled, a small, fragile thing, but real. Then, as Emma was clearing the plates, Luca looked directly at his father and asked the question that had been building for 2 years. "Daddy, do you still miss Mommy?" The dining room fell silent. Emma's hands stilled on the plates. Sophia held her breath. Dominic looked at his son, really looked at him, and saw not a painful reminder of what he'd lost, but a beautiful testament to what he'd had. The dam inside him finally broke. "Every single day," Dominic said, his voice cracking. "Every single moment." Tears spilled down his scarred face, and he made no effort to hide them. "I miss her so much that sometimes I can't breathe. I miss her laugh and her terrible singing and the way she'd kiss my forehead when she thought I was sleeping. I miss how she loved you both more than anything in the world." He reached across the table, taking Luca's small hand in his larger, rougher one. "And I'm so sorry I haven't been here. I'm sorry I let you both hurt alone because I was too broken to be the father you deserved." Sophia scrambled out of her chair, her disabled leg forgotten as she limped around the table and threw her arms around her father's neck. Luca followed, and suddenly Dominic was holding both his children while they cried together for the first time since the funeral. Emma stepped back quietly, tears streaming down her own face, as she witnessed something she'd thought impossible, the Russo family beginning to heal. "I loved your mother with everything I had," Dominic whispered into his children's hair, "and I love you both just as much. I'm here now. I promise I'm here." Luca's voice, muffled against his father's shoulder, spoke the words that mattered most. "We love you too, Daddy." In that moment, in that dining room where emptiness had reigned for 2 years, something fundamental shifted. The ghost of Isabella Russo stopped haunting her family and started blessing them instead. 3 days after the family dinner, Emma was preparing the morning lesson when Dominic appeared in the living room doorway. The children had just left for their tutoring session with their academic instructor, leaving the house unusually quiet. "Miss Hayes," Dominic said, his hands shoved awkwardly into his pockets. "I have a request." Emma looked up from organizing sheet music. "Of course, Mr. Russo. I'd like you to teach me." He nodded toward the piano. "If music is helping my children, I should understand it. Be part of it with them, not just watching from the outside." Emma's surprise must have shown on her face because Dominic added quickly, "Unless you think it's inappropriate. I know you're already doing more than I pay you for." "It's not inappropriate," Emma interrupted gently. "I'd be happy to teach you. Sit down." Dominic approached the piano bench as if it might explode, sitting stiffly at one end while Emma settled at the other. The bench was smaller than it appeared, and their shoulders nearly touched. Emma caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something darker, gun oil, perhaps, or the leather of his shoulder holster. "Have you ever played before?" Emma asked, pulling up a beginner's exercise book. "Not since I was 7, Dominic said, his voice distant with memory. Emma's fingers paused on the keys. "Your mother taught you?" Dominic nodded, his jaw tightening. "Maria Russo believed that music civilized the soul. She grew up in Naples, daughter of a music professor, and she tried to bring that culture into our house. She'd sit me at our old upright piano every afternoon and teach me scales while my father was out conducting business." "What happened?" Emma asked softly. "My father found out." Dominic's hands clenched on his knees. "Carlo Russo didn't become head of the Chicago Mafia by raising soft sons. He smashed the piano with a sledgehammer while my mother and I watched. Told me that Russo men dealt in power, not pretty sounds. Music was for women and weaklings. A real man needed to know how to break fingers, not dance them across keys." The pain in his voice made Emma's heart ache. "Your mother must have been devastated. She cried for 3 days, then she never mentioned music again. She knew better than to defy my father twice." Dominic's gray eyes met Emma's blue ones. "I'm 42 years old, and I can still hear the sound of that piano splintering. My mother died when I was 16, and I never got to tell her that she was right, that beauty matters just as much as power." Emma placed her hand over his, the touch, electric and unexpected. "Then let's prove her right. Starting now." She guided his hands to the keys, positioning his fingers on middle C. "Piano isn't about force. It's about precision and feeling. Like this." She played a simple C major scale, her fingers flowing effortlessly. Then she took Dominic's right hand, positioning each finger carefully. The touch sent warmth through both of them, professional contact that somehow felt far more intimate than it should. "Now you try." Dominic pressed the keys hesitantly. The notes came out clumsy and uneven, but they were notes nonetheless. "Good," Emma encouraged. "Again, but this time relax your wrist. You're too tense." She placed her hand over his, demonstrating the fluid wrist motion. Dominic's breath caught at the contact, and when Emma looked up, their faces were inches apart, the air between them charged with something neither acknowledged but both felt. Like this? Dominic asked, his voice rougher than usual. Exactly like that. They worked for an hour, Emma patiently correcting posture and finger placement, while Dominic absorbed everything with surprising aptitude. His hands, scarred and dangerous, capable of such violence, moved across the keys with increasing grace. "You have natural talent," Emma said, genuine surprise in her voice. "Perfect pitch, I think. You're instinctively finding the right notes." Dominic played a simple melody Emma had taught him, and she realized he'd transposed it up a key without being asked something that required innate musical understanding. "My mother used to say I had her ears and my father's hands," Dominic said, completing the phrase. "Cursed to hear beauty but trained to destroy it." "You're not your father," Emma said firmly, "and it's not too late to honor your mother's memory by learning what she wanted to teach you." Dominic looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not just the housekeeper he'd hired or even the woman who'd saved his children. He saw Emma Hayes, survivor, healer, someone who understood that broken things could be beautiful precisely because they'd been shattered and put back together. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For this. For everything." Their eyes held for a moment too long before Emma pulled back, suddenly aware of the dangerous territory they were entering. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked, her voice professional but her hands trembling slightly as she gathered the sheet music. "Same time tomorrow," Dominic agreed, though both knew they were agreeing to more than just piano lessons. 2 weeks transformed the Russo household in ways no one had anticipated. The mansion that had been a mausoleum became something closer to a home, and the change centered entirely around one man's quiet revolution. Dominic Russo began arriving home at 6 o'clock instead of midnight. His associates noticed immediately meetings were cut short, business dinners declined, territories managed through delegation rather than personal oversight. Marco fielded complaints from captains who couldn't understand why their boss suddenly prioritized bedtime stories over territorial negotiations. But Dominic didn't care. He'd spent 2 years building an empire of fear while his children grew up without him. No amount of money or power was worth missing another moment. He ate dinner with Luca and Sofia every night, asking about their day, their music lessons, Sofia's drawings, and Luca's slowly expanding vocabulary. After dinner, he'd sit with them in the living room while Emma played piano. And sometimes when he thought no one was watching, Dominic would join in, his improving skills a testament to his nightly practice sessions. The children blossomed under his attention. Luca now spoke in full sentences, his vocabulary returning like flowers after winter. Sofia had stopped hiding her leg brace, and even designed colorful covers for it, turning perceived weakness into artistic expression. But it was the late nights that changed everything. It started innocently enough. Emma would finish tucking the children into bed around 9, then head to the kitchen to prepare her own modest dinner. One evening, she found Dominic already there, making coffee with the expensive machine he'd never learned to operate properly. "Let me," Emma said, taking over before he could flood the counter again. "You're a mafia boss, not a barista." Dominic smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "Apparently I can negotiate million-dollar deals but can't master basic appliances." They'd shared coffee that night, sitting at the kitchen island talking about nothing important, books they'd read, places they'd never been, small dreams that had nothing to do with survival or revenge. When Emma finally said goodnight 2 hours later, Dominic realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed so much. It became their ritual. Every night after the children slept, Emma and Dominic would meet in the kitchen. Sometimes they talked about the twins' progress. Often they discussed music, Emma sharing stories about her training, Dominic describing the concerts his mother had taken him to as a child before his father forbade such weakness. But increasingly, they talked about nothing and everything, the kind of meandering conversations that only happen when two people feel safe enough to be unguarded. One night, Emma was reaching for the sugar bowl on the high shelf, standing on tiptoe. Dominic moved behind her, his arm extending over her shoulder to retrieve it. For a moment they were frozen, his chest against her back, his breath warm on her neck, the sugar bowl forgotten between them. "Sorry," Dominic said, stepping back quickly. "I didn't mean to." "It's fine," Emma interrupted, but her hands trembled as she took the bowl from him. After that, the touches seemed to multiply. Accidental brushes of fingers when passing coffee cups, Dominic's hand on Emma's lower back when she stumbled on the stairs, Emma adjusting his collar before he left for work, her fingers lingering just a second too long. 3 weeks into their nightly routine, Dominic was watching Emma laugh at something he'd said, her whole face transforming. blue eyes sparkling in the kitchen's soft light, when the realization hit him like a physical blow. He was in love with her. Not the desperate, all-consuming love he'd felt for Isabella, but something different, quieter, deeper. Emma had walked into his broken life and somehow made him want to be whole again. She'd given him back his children and, in the process, given him back himself. The thought terrified him. Emma noticed his sudden silence. "Are you all right?" "I need to tell you something," Dominic said, then stopped. "How did you tell someone you were falling in love with them when you were a mafia boss and she was your employee? When you had blood on your hands and she'd already lost everyone she'd ever loved?" Emma's expression shuddered, as if she sensed danger. "Mr. Russo Dominic," he corrected. "Please. After everything, I think we're past formalities." "Dominic," Emma said carefully. "If this is about the piano lessons or the time I spend with the children, I can adjust. It's not about that." He ran his hand through his hair, frustrated at his inability to find words. I want you to know how much you mean to this family, how much you mean to me." Emma stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Please don't say what I think you're going to say." "Why not?" Dominic stood as well, moving closer. "Because I'm your employer? Because it's complicated?" "Emma, everything about my life is complicated, but you're the first simple, good thing I've had in years." "I'm not good," Emma said, her voice breaking. "I'm damaged and broken, and everyone I've ever loved has died. My parents burned to death. Michael died a week before our wedding. Our baby died in my arms. I'm cursed, Dominic. I destroy the people who care about me. That's not true." "It is true." Tears streamed down Emma's face. "And I can't. I won't watch you and Luca and Sophia become the next names on that list. I'd rather leave now than stay and lose you all." Dominic caught her wrist as she tried to flee. "Look at me," he commanded gently. "When she did," he continued, "you didn't kill those people. Tragedy did. Cruelty did. But you survived, Emma. You survived, and you're still capable of love and kindness and making broken children whole again. That's not a curse. That's a miracle." "You don't understand. I understand that I'm falling in love with you," Dominic said, the words finally spoken. "And yes, that terrifies me too. But I'd rather be terrified with you than empty without you." Emma stared at him, torn between the desperate need to believe him and the deep-seated fear that loving her meant dying. Before either could speak again, they heard small footsteps on the stairs. "Miss Emma?" Sophia's voice called. "I had a bad dream." They stepped apart quickly, Emma wiping her eyes while Dominic composed his features. But as Emma went to comfort Sophia, she glanced back at Dominic, and in that look was a question neither of them could answer yet. Could two broken people risk putting each other back together, or would they just cut themselves on each other's sharp edges? The storm rolled into Chicago 3 nights later, with the fury of something ancient and angry. Thunder shook the mansion's foundations, while lightning carved jagged scars across the black sky. Rain hammered the windows like fists demanding entry. Emma was reading in her small room when the lights flickered once, twice, then died completely. The backup generator should have kicked in immediately, but the house remained dark. The storm must have damaged the electrical system entirely. She'd barely found her phone's flashlight when she heard the scream. "No, no, Mommy." Sophia's voice, raw with terror, cut through the thunder. Emma ran, nearly colliding with Dominic in the hallway. He was already moving toward the children's rooms, his own phone casting wild shadows on the walls. They found Sophia in her bed, tangled in sheets, sobbing hysterically. Luca stood frozen in his doorway across the hall, hands clamped over his ears, whimpering. "Sophia, sweetheart, it's okay," Emma soothed, sitting on the bed and pulling the girl into her arms. But Sophia was beyond comfort, her small body rigid with panic. "It was dark. Mommy was in the dark, and then the loud noise, and I couldn't find her." Sophia's words tumbled out between gasping sobs. "The dark took her away." Dominic knelt beside the bed, his face stricken. "Baby, I'm here. Daddy's here." "The day Mommy died," Sophia choked out. "We were at school and Mrs. Peterson turned off the classroom lights for movie time, and then they came and said Mommy was gone, and I couldn't see and I couldn't breathe." And Emma looked at Dominic over Sophia's head, understanding flooding through her. The girl had been in darkness when she learned of her mother's death. Now every blackout triggered that trauma. "Luca, come here," Dominic called gently to his son, who still stood paralyzed in the doorway. The boy shuffled forward, and Dominic pulled him close with his free arm. For the next hour, they sat together on Sophia's bed while the storm raged. Emma sang softly lullabies and gentle melodies while Dominic held his children, murmuring reassurances. Gradually, Sophia's sobs quieted. Luca's trembling eased. "Will you stay?" Sophia whispered, half asleep now. "Both of you? Please?" Emma glanced at Dominic, who nodded. They arranged themselves on either side of the bed, Dominic against the wall, Sophia and Luca in the middle, Emma on the edge. The children's breathing slowly deepened into sleep, though Sophia kept one hand fisted in Emma's shirt and the other clutching her father's. The storm continued its assault, but inside the small bedroom, peace gradually settled. Emma and Dominic sat in the darkness, listening to the twins breathe, neither wanting to move and disturb this fragile moment. "Thank you," Dominic whispered across the sleeping children, "for knowing what to do, for always knowing." "You did just as much," Emma whispered back. "You were here. That's what mattered." An hour passed. The rain softened to a steady drumbeat. Emma carefully extracted herself from Sophia's grip, and Dominic did the same. They stood on opposite sides of the bed, watching their children, and Emma realized she'd thought of them as their children, not just his. They tiptoed into the hallway, pulling the door mostly closed. The darkness was complete except for the occasional flash of distant lightning. They stood close, voices barely above breath. "I meant what I said the other night," Dominic murmured. "About falling in love with you." Emma's heart hammered. "Dominic, I know you're scared. I'm scared too. Every person I've ever loved, I've either lost or put in danger. My mother died hating what I became. Isabella died because of what I am. But Emma, I can't keep pretending I don't feel this." In the darkness, emboldened by the inability to see each other's faces clearly, Emma admitted, "I feel it too. And it terrifies me because everyone I love dies, Dominic. Everyone. I can't survive losing anyone else." "Then maybe we survive together," Dominic said, his hand finding hers in the dark. "Maybe we're both so broken that we understand how to be careful with each other's pieces." Lightning flashed, illuminating Emma's face for a heartbeat beautiful and fragile and stronger than she knew. Dominic's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, giving her the choice, the control. Emma's breath caught. Every rational part of her screamed to say no, to protect herself, to run before she could lose another person she loved. But standing in the darkness with this dangerous, damaged man who'd somehow become her anchor, she found herself rising on her toes and closing the distance between them. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, questioning. Then Dominic's arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer, and Emma's hands found his hair, and the kiss deepened into something that tasted like hope and desperation, and the terrifying possibility of new beginnings. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Emma pressed her forehead against his chest. "I'm so scared," she whispered. "Everyone I love dies. My parents, Michael, our baby. What if loving you means losing you?" Dominic tilted her face up, forcing her to meet his eyes even in the darkness. "I'm not easy to kill, Emma. I've survived 3 assassination attempts, a car bombing, and 2 years of trying to drink myself to death. I'm not going anywhere." "You can't promise that." "No," he admitted. "But I can promise that however many days I have, I want to spend them with you. Is that enough?" Emma's answer came not in words but in another kiss deeper this time, filled with the acknowledgement that love was always a risk, but some risks were worth taking. Thunder rolled overhead, but neither of them noticed. In the darkness of the Russo mansion, 2 broken souls chose to risk breaking each other's hearts, because the alternative, a life without this connection, was more terrifying than any storm. They stood in the hallway for a long moment after the kiss, foreheads touching, breathing each other's air. The storm outside had gentled to a whisper, and through the tall windows at the end of the corridor, moonlight began breaking through the clouds, painting everything in silver. "Come with me," Dominic said softly, taking Emma's hand. He led her down the stairs to his study, not the imposing office where he conducted business, but a smaller room lined with books that had belonged to his mother. He lit candles since the power remained out, and the flickering light cast dancing shadows on the walls. They sat together on the leather sofa, close but not touching, as if both needed space to navigate what came next. "If we're going to do this," Emma said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands, "you need to know everything. Not just the sanitized version I told you before. The whole truth." Dominic took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I'm listening." Emma took a shaking breath. "I told you I was in foster care after my parents died. What I didn't tell you was about David Henderson, my foster father, from age 12 to 16. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "He seemed kind at first. He and his wife Joan took me in, gave me my own room, bought me school supplies. For 3 months, I thought maybe I'd finally found a real home. Then one night, Joan worked a double shift at the hospital. David came to my room. Dominic's hand tightened on hers, but he said nothing, letting her speak. It started with touches that lasted too long, then violations that got worse each time. He told me no one would believe me, that I was a troubled foster kid with a history of behavioral problems. He was a respected insurance agent. Who would trust my word over his? Tears tracked down Emma's cheeks. It happened 2 or 3 times a week for 4 years. I learned to leave my body, to float somewhere above the bed, and pretend I was somewhere else. Anywhere else. I have scars, Dominic. Not just emotional ones, physical ones, that won't ever fade. Did you ever tell anyone? Dominic asked, his voice rough with barely controlled rage. The night before my 16th birthday, I tried to tell Joan. She called me a liar, said I was trying to destroy her marriage because I was jealous of their happiness. I ran that night. Lived on the streets for 2 years until I met Michael. She paused, gathering strength for the next part. Michael was the first person who touched me and didn't take. He was patient, gentle. It took me 6 months to even hold his hand. A year before I could kiss him without flinching. When I got pregnant, I was terrified and thrilled all at once. Terrified I'd be a terrible mother because of what happened to me, but thrilled to finally create something good out of all that pain. When Michael died and I lost the baby, Emma continued, her voice breaking. The doctors told me the trauma had caused permanent damage, scar tissue, a uterus that won't carry a child to term. I'm 27 years old and I'll never be pregnant again. I'll never give anyone children. She finally looked at Dominic, her blue eyes swimming with tears. So you see, I'm broken, Dominic. Damaged beyond repair. You deserve someone whole. Someone who can give you more children if you want them. Someone who doesn't wake up screaming from nightmares about men in the dark. I'm not that person. I'll never be that person. Dominic was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she'd told him. When he finally spoke, his voice was fierce. You want to know what I see when I look at you, Emma Hayes? He shifted to face her fully, his hands framing her face. I see a woman who survived a fire that killed her parents, who endured 4 years of abuse and came out the other side, still capable of kindness, who lost the love of her life and their child but didn't let that loss make her cruel or bitter. I see a woman who works 3 jobs to pay off medical debt that wasn't her fault, who took a job in a mafia boss's house because she needed the money, but stayed because she saw 2 broken children who needed her more than she needed safety. His thumbs wiped away her tears. You think you're broken? Emma, you're the strongest person I've ever met. You've been shattered and you put yourself back together. That's not weakness. That's warrior-level strength. But I can't give you children. I have children, Dominic interrupted. 2 beautiful, damaged children who love you like you're already their mother. I don't need more kids, Emma. I need you. Just you. The nightmares, the scars, the fear. I have nightmares too. I have scars from knife fights and bullet wounds. I wake up seeing Isabella's blood on the sidewalk. We're both haunted. Emma, but maybe we can be haunted together. Emma's resolve was crumbling. What if I can't be what you need? What if I'm too broken? Dominic pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. Then we'll be broken together. Emma, I don't want perfection. I want you. Scars, nightmares, fears, all of it. I love you. Not in spite of what you've survived, but because you survived it, and you're still here, still fighting, still capable of love. Say it again, Emma whispered. I love you. Again. I love you, Emma Hayes. I love your strength and your scars and your impossibly kind heart. I love that you saw my broken children and decided to fix them. I love that you challenge me and don't let me hide from what I feel. He kissed her softly. I love you. Emma broke then, wrapping her arms around him and burying her face in his neck. She cried for the little girl who lost her parents, for the teenager who was violated, for the young woman who lost her love and her baby. But she also cried in relief, because for the first time since Michael died, someone looked at all her broken pieces and said they loved her anyway. I love you too, she finally whispered against his skin. God help me, I love you too, and I'm so scared. We'll be scared together, Dominic promised, holding her like she was something precious. But we won't be alone anymore, never alone again. Outside, the storm had passed completely, and moonlight flooded through the windows, turning everything to silver and shadow. 2 broken people held each other in the candlelight, choosing love despite the fear, choosing hope despite the scars. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was something better, real, messy, and achingly human. And it was theirs. 3 weeks passed in a bubble of cautious happiness. Dominic and Emma kept their relationship private, not ready to explain to Luca and Sophia what was still so new and fragile between them. But the house felt different, warmer, lighter, as if love itself had changed the air. During the day, Emma remained the professional housekeeper and music teacher, but at night, after the children slept, she and Dominic would steal moments together, whispered conversations over coffee, kisses in darkened hallways, hands finding each other when no one was watching. Dominic had even begun teaching Emma about his legitimate business holdings, discussing plans to slowly transition away from the family's criminal enterprises. "I want Luca and Sophia to inherit something they can be proud of," he'd told her, "not an empire built on blood." Emma was in the kitchen preparing lunch when Marco appeared at the service entrance, his expression grim. He waited until she left the room before approaching Dominic in his study. "We have a problem, boss," Marco said without preamble, sliding a folder across the desk. Dominic opened it to find surveillance photos, his mansion from various angles, zoomed-in shots of the windows, and most disturbing, images of Emma walking with the children in the garden. Where did these come from? Dominic's voice was deadly calm. Elena Kovac. The name hit Dominic like a physical blow. Elena Kovac, the Russian mafia boss who'd ordered Isabella's death, the woman he'd been hunting for 2 years, who'd vanished like smoke after the bombing, the ghost who haunted his nightmares. "She's in Chicago?" Dominic asked, his knuckles white as he gripped the photos. "She never left. She's been watching, waiting. My contacts say she's been tracking your movements for the past month." Marco pointed to the most recent photo, Emma and the children at the front gate. "She knows about the woman, boss. About Emma." Dominic's blood ran cold. "How long has she been watching?" "At least 3 weeks. Maybe longer." The same 3 weeks Dominic had been falling in love. The same 3 weeks he'd let his guard down, allowed himself to be happy, forgot that happiness was a luxury men like him couldn't afford. "Double the security," Dominic ordered. "I want 4 men on the children at all times. Emma doesn't leave the property without 6 guards minimum. Install new cameras on the perimeter." "Already done," Marco interrupted. "But boss, you need to tell Emma. She should know what kind of danger." "No." Dominic's voice was absolute. "She can't know. Emma's already terrified of losing people she loves. If she knows there's a threat, she'll run. She'll leave to protect us. And I can't," his voice cracked. "I can't lose her too." Marco looked at his oldest friend with something like pity. "You're making a mistake. It's my mistake to make." A mile away, in a penthouse apartment overlooking the Chicago River, Elena Kovac stood at the window with military-grade binoculars. Her platinum blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her ice-blue eyes tracking movement at the Russo estate. "He's increased security," her lieutenant observed. "He knows we're watching." Elena smiled, a cold expression that never reached her eyes. "Of course he knows. Dominic Russo isn't stupid, but knowing I'm watching and being able to stop me are very different things." She adjusted the focus, zooming in on Emma as she hung laundry in the garden, a domestic scene so at odds with the dangerous world surrounding her. 2 years ago, I took his wife and left him broken," Elena said softly. "But broken men are dangerous, they have nothing left to lose. Now, though," she tapped the binoculars against her palm. "Now Dominic Russo has something to lose again. A new woman. Those children finally smiling. Hope. What's the play?" her lieutenant asked. Elena turned from the window, her smile widening. "Hope is the cruelest weakness of all. It makes you believe you can have happiness in a world like ours. Dominic has forgotten what I taught him 2 years ago, that men like him don't get happy endings." She crossed to her desk, pulling up surveillance footage on multiple screens. "We'll wait until he's completely comfortable, completely in love, completely convinced he can protect them. Then we'll take everything. Not just the woman this time, the children too. I want him to choose." "Choose what? Who dies first?" Elena's laugh was ice and broken glass. "The woman he loves, or the children he failed to protect? Let's see what kind of father Dominic Russo really is when the blade is at both their throats." Her lieutenant shifted uncomfortably. "When do we move?" Elena studied the screens, watching Dominic emerge from the house to join Emma and the children. The mafia boss was smiling, actually smiling as Sophia showed him something she'd drawn. "Soon," Elena said. "Let him love her a little longer. Let him believe he's finally found peace. The fall is so much more satisfying when they have something beautiful to lose." She touched the screen where Emma's face appeared, her finger tracing the outline. "Welcome to our world, Emma Hayes. I do hope you've made peace with your God. You're going to meet him very soon." Dominic woke on his 38th birthday to the sound of whispering outside his bedroom door. He smiled despite himself. The children were planning something, their excited voices barely contained. It was the first birthday since Isabella's death that he didn't wake up wanting to stay unconscious. The first birthday that held promise instead of pain. When he came downstairs, the dining room had been transformed. Handmade decorations covered the walls. Sophia's artwork depicting the family in brilliant colors. Luca's more abstract pieces that somehow captured emotion in swirls of paint. A cake sat on the table, slightly lopsided, but clearly made with love. "Surprise," Sophia shouted, throwing her arms around her father's waist. Luca hung back, but his smile was genuine and bright. Emma stood in the doorway, flower in her hair and frosting on her cheek, looking more beautiful than any woman had a right to. "Happy birthday," she said softly. The morning passed in a blur of laughter and terrible homemade pancakes that Dominic insisted were the best he'd ever tasted. But the real surprise came after lunch when Emma gathered everyone in the living room. "Your father has a birthday gift," she announced to the children. "But first, you two have something special you've been practicing." Luca and Sophia exchanged nervous glances, then moved to their positions, Luca at the piano, Sophia standing beside him with her hand on his shoulder for support. "We learned a song," Sophia said, "for Daddy's birthday." Luca's hands trembled as they touched the keys. He played the opening notes of Happy Birthday, but it wasn't the simple children's version. It was a complex arrangement, full of jazz chords and beautiful runs that showed how much he'd learned. Then, as the melody built, Luca began to sing. His voice was thin and uncertain at first, barely above a whisper, but with each word, it grew stronger. Sophia joined in harmony, her voice weaving around her brother's like they'd been singing together all their lives, instead of just the past few weeks. Dominic felt tears streaming down his face. His son, his silent, traumatized son, was singing, not just humming or speaking in sentences, but actually singing with confidence and joy. When the song ended, Dominic stood and pulled both children into a crushing embrace. "That was perfect," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're both perfect." Emma watched from the piano bench, her own eyes wet. Dominic caught her gaze over the children's heads, and something passed between them, a recognition that this moment, this healing, was as much her gift as theirs. "I have an announcement," Dominic said, keeping the children close. "And I need you both to listen carefully, because this is important." Luca and Sophia looked up, suddenly serious. "Emma came into our lives when we were all broken," Dominic began. "She gave you back your voices and your smiles. She gave me back my children. She made this house a home again." He looked at Emma. "She made me remember how to hope." He released the children and crossed to Emma, taking her hands in his. Her eyes widened, understanding dawning. "Emma Hayes," Dominic said, dropping to one knee. From his pocket, he pulled a small velvet box. "I know this is fast. I know it's complicated. But I also know that I don't want to spend another day of my life without you in it." He opened the box, revealing a ring, a simple platinum band with a single diamond, elegant and understated, just like Emma herself. "But before I ask you the most important question, I need to ask them." Dominic turned to face his children, still on one knee. "Luca, Sophia, how would you feel if Emma became part of our family? Not just as your teacher or my friend, but as my wife? As your mom?" Sophia interrupted, her voice hopeful and scared at once. "Would Emma be our mom?" "If she says yes," Dominic confirmed. "And if you both agree." Sophia launched herself at Emma, nearly knocking her off the piano bench. "Yes, yes, please say yes." Luca approached more slowly, his hand finding Emma's. "Will you stay forever?" he asked, the question carrying the weight of all his abandonment fears. "Even when bad things happen?" Emma pulled him close with her free arm. "Forever," she promised. Dominic turned back to Emma, still kneeling, the ring glinting in the afternoon light streaming through the windows. "Emma Hayes, will you marry me?" "Yes," Emma whispered, then louder. "Yes." Dominic slid the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into a kiss that was gentle and fierce at once. Luca and Sophia cheered, and for one perfect moment, the Russo family was complete and happy and whole. Outside, a mile away on a rooftop, Elena Kovac lowered her binoculars and smiled. Through the scope of her sniper rifle, the crosshairs had been centered perfectly on Emma's head throughout the entire proposal. She could have ended it right there, one shot, and Dominic Russo would be broken again. But where was the fun in that? "Not yet," she murmured to her lieutenant. "Let him have his happiness a little longer. Let him plan the wedding, dream about the future, convince himself he's finally safe." She adjusted the scope, centering it on each family member in turn. "Then we'll take them all. And this time, Dominic won't just watch someone he loves die. He'll have to choose who lives and who doesn't." Elena packed up her rifle, her ice blue eyes cold with anticipation. 3 days. Give them 3 days of joy. Then we move. Inside the mansion, oblivious to the crosshairs that had just marked them for death, the Russo family celebrated a birthday that promised new beginnings. They had no idea how soon those promises would be tested, or how high the price of happiness would become. 3 days of bliss, 3 days of planning, a small wedding, of Luca and Sophia arguing over what songs to play at the ceremony, of Emma wearing her ring and feeling like maybe, finally, she deserved to be happy. 3 days before everything shattered. "I need to run to the market," Emma announced at breakfast. "We're out of ingredients for Luca's favorite pasta." Dominic looked up from his coffee, automatic concern crossing his face. Since Marco's warning about Elena, he'd been on edge, though he'd hidden it well. "Take the guards. Dom, it's just the grocery store. 4 guards. Non-negotiable." His tone left no room for argument. Emma sighed but agreed. What she didn't see was the text Dominic sent to Marco. "Keep extra eyes on them. Something feels wrong." The market was crowded for a Wednesday afternoon. Emma pushed the cart while Sophia and Luca walked beside her, the 4 bodyguards maintaining a loose perimeter. Tony and Marcus in front, Dimitri and James behind. All ex-military, all loyal to Dominic, all about to die. They were in the produce section when Emma noticed the man in the black jacket. He was watching them too intently, his hand inside his coat. She'd lived on Chicago streets long enough to recognize danger. "Tony," she said quietly to the guard closest to her. 3 o'clock. Black jacket. Tony's hand went to his weapon, but he was 3 seconds too slow. The explosion came from nowhere, a flashbang that turned the world white and deaf. Smoke billowed through the produce section, thick and choking. People screamed and ran in all directions. Through the chaos, Emma saw them 6 figures in gas masks emerging from the smoke like demons from hell. "Down!" Tony shouted, pushing Emma and the children behind a display of apples. His gun was out, firing at the approaching figures. Marcus joined him, their shots precise despite the pandemonium. But the attackers had come prepared. Suppressed weapons spat death. Tony went down first, 3 rounds to the chest. Marcus fell seconds later, his weapon clattering across the tile floor. Dimitri grabbed Emma and the children, trying to drag them toward the back exit. "Move! Now!" They made it 5 feet before the knife caught Dimitri in the throat. He gurgled and collapsed, blood spraying across Sophia's face. The girl screamed, the sound cutting through Emma's shock like a blade. James was the last guard standing, and he fought like a man possessed. He took down 2 attackers before a third put a bullet through his skull. Emma's survival instincts, honed by years of abuse and street living, kicked in. She shoved Luca and Sophia behind her, grabbed a wine bottle from a shattered display, and swung it at the nearest masked attacker. Glass exploded against his face mask. "Run!" she screamed at the children, but there was nowhere to run. The attackers had them surrounded. A woman's voice, accented and cold, cut through the chaos. "Don't damage the merchandise. Russo wants them intact." Emma fought anyway. She clawed and bit and kicked, landing a solid hit to one attacker's groin that sent him stumbling. But there were too many, and they were too trained. The blow came from behind, something hard crashing into her skull. Emma's vision exploded into stars, her legs giving out. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Luca's terrified face as someone grabbed him, his mouth open in a scream she could no longer hear. Emma woke to darkness and the smell of mildew. Her head throbbed where she'd been hit, and her wrists burned, zip ties cutting into her skin. She was sitting on a cold concrete floor, back against a wall. "Miss Emma?" A small, terrified voice in the darkness. "Sophia." "I'm here, sweetheart," Emma managed, though speaking made her head pound. "Are you hurt?" "My face." "There's blood." Sophia's voice broke into sobs. "It's not yours," Emma said, the memory of Dimitri's death flooding back with nauseating clarity. "Sophia, listen to me. Where's Luca?" "I'm here." Luca's voice came from Emma's other side. "They tied us up. I can't move my hands." Emma's eyes slowly adjusted to the dim light seeping under a door across the room. They were in some kind of basement or warehouse, bare concrete walls, no windows, nothing but the 3 of them and their fear. "It's going to be okay," Emma lied, because what else could she say? "Your father will find us. He'll—" The door opened, flooding the room with harsh fluorescent light. Emma squinted against the brightness, making out a silhouette in the doorway. A woman walked in, her platinum blonde hair pulled back severely, ice blue eyes assessing them like a scientist examining specimens. She was beautiful in the way a knife was beautiful, cold, sharp, deadly. Behind her, 2 guards dragged in a chair. The woman sat, crossing her legs with elegant precision, and smiled. "Emma Hayes," she said, her Russian accent turning the name into something foreign and dangerous. "The woman foolish enough to fall in love with Dominic Russo. I'm Elena Kovac. Perhaps you've heard of me?" Emma's blood turned to ice. Elena Kovac, the woman who killed Isabella. The ghost Dominic had been hunting for 2 years. "What do you want?" Emma asked, trying to keep her voice steady for the children's sake. Elena's smile widened. "What I want is to watch Dominic Russo suffer. 2 years ago, I took his wife, but that only made him dangerous, a man with nothing to lose. Now, though," her gaze swept over Emma and the children, "now he has everything to lose again, and I'm going to make him choose." "Choose what?" Emma whispered, though she already knew the answer. Elena leaned forward, her eyes glittering with malice. "Who dies first, of course. You or his children. Let's see what kind of man Dominic really is when the knife is at all your throats." She stood, smoothing her skirt. "Make yourselves comfortable. You're going to be here a while. I want Dominic to suffer the anticipation before the real pain begins." Elena walked to the door, then paused. "Oh, and Miss Hayes? I've killed before for interfering with Dominic Russo. You're welcome to try escaping, fighting, whatever desperate plan you're already forming. It will make breaking you so much more satisfying." The door slammed shut, plunging them back into darkness. Sophia and Luca both started crying, and Emma pulled them as close as her restraints allowed, holding children that weren't hers but felt like they were. "I've got you," she whispered, though she had nothing, no weapons, no plan, no hope. "I've got you both. I won't let her hurt you." But even as she made the promise, Emma knew it was one she might not be able to keep. Hours passed in the darkness. Emma lost track of time. It could have been 6 hours or 16. The children had cried themselves into exhausted silence, their small bodies pressed against hers for whatever comfort she could provide. When the door finally opened again, Elena Kovac entered with a laptop under her arm and that same cold smile on her perfect face. Behind her, 2 guards set up a tripod and camera. "Time to send Daddy a message," Elena said cheerfully, as if they were filming a birthday greeting instead of a ransom video. She positioned the camera to capture all 3 of them, Emma in the middle, with Luca and Sophia huddled against her sides, all of them filthy and exhausted and terrified. Elena crouched in front of them, her face inches from Emma's. "Here's how this works, Miss Hayes. In approximately 3 minutes, I'm going to send Dominic Russo a video. In that video, I'm going to give him a choice." She pulled a knife from her belt, a wicked hunting blade that gleamed in the harsh light. "He can save you, or he can save his children. Not both. He has 24 hours to decide which 2 of you get to live, and which one dies screaming." Emma's breath caught. "You can't, he'll never but he will." Elena traced the flat of the blade down Emma's cheek, and Emma forced herself not to flinch. "Dominic Russo is many things, but above all, he's a father. When I took Isabella 2 years ago, he lost his mind. But his children survived. He rebuilt his life around them. Now I'm curious, will he sacrifice his lover to save his blood? Or has this broken housekeeper actually convinced him she's worth his children's lives?" She stood, nodding to her men to start recording. "Dominic," Elena said to the camera, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "I have something that belongs to you. Actually, 3 somethings." She walked around the captives slowly, the camera following. "Your children look well, a bit frightened, but then, they should be. And your fiancé." Elena grabbed Emma's hair, yanking her head back. "So pretty. Such a shame." Emma bit back a cry of pain, refusing to give Elena the satisfaction. "Here's the game," Elena continued. "You have 24 hours to choose. Come to the warehouse at the old docks, you know, the one, where your father used to store his shipments. Come alone. When you arrive, I'll give you a gun with 2 bullets. She pressed the knife against Emma's throat, not cutting but threatening. "You shoot 2 of them, and I let the 3rd go free. Choose your children, and your pretty Emma dies. Choose Emma, and you watch both your babies bleed out." Sophia whimpered, and Luca had gone completely rigid, his eyes blank and staring, retreating into the catatonic silence he'd lived in for 2 years. Emma's heart broke, seeing his hard-won progress shatter. "Of course," Elena said, moving the knife to rest against Sophia's cheek. "You could refuse to choose, but then I kill all 3, slowly, while you watch. So, really, Dominic, you're saving 2 lives. That's generous of me, don't you think?" She stepped back, admiring her work. 24 hours. "The clock starts now." Elena nodded, and the camera stopped recording. She uploaded the video to her laptop, typed something, and smiled. "Sent. I imagine your phone is ringing right about now, Dominic." As the door closed behind Elena and her guards, Emma finally let the tears fall. Sophia was sobbing openly now, calling for her father in broken, desperate cries. Luca remained frozen, unreachable, lost again in the trauma that Emma had worked so hard to heal. "Shh, baby, it's okay," Emma whispered to Sophia, though nothing was okay and might never be okay again. "Your daddy will come. He'll figure something out. He won't let her hurt us." But even as she spoke the words, Emma remembered Dominic's face when he talked about Isabella's death, the guilt, the self-blame, the way he'd shattered when forced to choose between revenge and parenthood. How could she ask him to make an even more impossible choice now? "Miss Emma," Sophia choked out between sobs, "I don't want Daddy to choose. I don't want anyone to die." Emma pressed her lips to the girl's forehead, tasting salt and fear. "I know, sweetheart, I know." She looked at Luca, who stared at nothing, and felt rage building beneath her terror. Elena had taken these children's voices once before by killing their mother. Now she was stealing them again with this sick game. Emma tested the zip ties binding her wrists. They were tight, professional, but she'd survived David Henderson's abuse for 4 years. She'd lived on Chicago's streets. She'd buried everyone she loved and kept breathing. If Elena Kovac thought Emma Hayes would sit quietly and wait to be executed, the Russian bitch had severely underestimated her prey. 24 hours. Emma had 24 hours to figure out how to save these children, even if it meant dying in the process. Because if Dominic had to choose, Emma already knew what the answer would be, and she'd make sure he never had to live with that guilt. "Sophia, Luca," Emma whispered, "listen to me very carefully. We're going to get out of this. I promise you. Do you trust me?" Sophia nodded through her tears. Luca remained frozen, but Emma saw his eyes flicker toward her voice, still in there, still fighting. "Good," Emma said, already working the zip tie against the rough concrete wall behind her. "Then let's make sure your daddy doesn't have to make any terrible choices." Dominic was in a meeting with 3 district captains when his phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen, an unknown number, a video file. His instinct screamed danger even before he opened it. The first frame showed Emma's face, and Dominic's world stopped. He stood abruptly, ignoring the startled looks from his men, and played the video. With each second, something inside him fractured, seeing his children's terrified faces, Elena's knife at Emma's throat, the impossible choice laid out like a death sentence. When the video ended, Dominic stood motionless for 3 heartbeats. Then he exploded. The conference table went first, flipped with a roar of rage that sent papers and laptops crashing to the floor. His fist went through the wall, then through the window, glass shattering and blood streaming from his knuckles unnoticed. He grabbed a chair and hurled it across the room, wood splintering against expensive oak paneling. "Out!" he bellowed at the captains, who fled without question. They'd never seen their boss lose control like this. Dominic Russo's rage was usually cold and calculated, not this primal, devastating fury. Marco burst through the door, gun drawn, thinking they were under attack. What he found was worse, his boss destroying his own office. Blood and broken glass everywhere, and tears streaming down Dominic's scarred face. "Boss," Marco started. "She has them." Dominic's voice was raw, broken. "Elena has Emma and my children. She wants me to choose which one dies." He replayed the video, forcing Marco to watch. By the end, Marco's knuckles were white on his weapon. "It's a trap," Marco said immediately. "She wants you to come alone so she can kill all of you." "I know it's a trap!" Dominic roared, sweeping everything off his desk. "What choice do I have, Marco? Let them die? Choose between my children and the woman I love? There's no good option." He sank into his chair, head in his hands, blood from his shattered knuckles staining his hair. "Isabella died because of me. I won't. I can't let it happen again." Marco pulled up a chair, his voice low and urgent. "Then we don't play Elena's game. We bring the full force of the organization, 50 men, heavy weapons. We hit that warehouse hard and fast. She'll kill them the moment she sees backup. You know she will. Then what? You just walk in there and execute your own family?" Marco's voice cracked. "Boss, I've known you since we were kids. I've followed you into hell more times than I can count, but I can't watch you do this." Dominic looked up, his gray eyes empty of everything but pain. "Then don't watch." A heavy silence fell. Then Marco said something that shocked them both. "What about the FBI?" "What? Detective Carter. He's been trying to take you down for 5 years. But he's a good cop. He actually cares about civilians. Emma's a civilian. So are your kids." Dominic's laugh was bitter. "Carter would rather see me dead than help me. Maybe. But he's got resources we don't. Thermal imaging, tactical teams, negotiators. And he wants Elena as badly as you do. She's killed 3 federal witnesses." The idea was insane. Dominic Russo, Asking the FBI for help was like a wolf asking sheep for protection. But as he looked at Emma's terrified face frozen on his phone screen, Dominic realized he was out of options. Get him here. Now. Marco made the call. 20 minutes later, Detective James Carter walked into Dominic Russo's destroyed office, his hand resting on his service weapon, clearly expecting a trap. Carter was 43, graying at the temples, with eyes that had seen too much and still somehow maintained faith in justice. He looked at Dominic with undisguised contempt. This better be good, Russo. I don't make house calls to criminals. Dominic played the video without preamble. Carter's expression shifted from suspicion to horror as Elena's ultimatum played out. Christ, Carter breathed. That's Elena Kovac. We've been hunting her for 3 years. I know who she is. She killed my wife. Dominic's voice was dead calm now, the rage compressed into something cold and focused. I need your help to save them. You need my. Carter laughed incredulously. You've spent 5 years evading every trap I've set, and now you want my help? Name your price. Carter studied him for a long moment. My price is you, Russo. After we get those people out, if we get them out, you turn yourself in. Full confession. Every crime, every body, every dollar of dirty money, you give me everything I need to dismantle your organization. Marco started to protest, but Dominic held up his bloodied hand. Done. Boss. You can't. I can and I will. Dominic stood, squaring his shoulders. If Emma and my children survive, what happens to me doesn't matter. If they don't. His voice cracked. Then I don't want to be free anyway. Carter pulled out his phone. I'm calling in my tactical team. We'll need blueprints of the warehouse, surveillance on Elena's movements, and intel on her crew. Can you provide that? Marco, give him everything. Dominic turned to Carter. But understand this. Detective, if your team's incompetence gets my family killed, you won't live long enough to arrest me. Noted. Carter was already coordinating with his team. We move at dawn. That gives us 18 hours to plan. Elena expects you alone and desperate. We'll give her alone and desperate while 50 federal agents surround the building. She'll have contingencies, kill switches, deadman triggers, then we'll account for them. Carter met Dominic's eyes with grudging respect. I've wanted to put you away for years, Russo, but nobody deserves what Elena Kovac is planning. We'll get them back. And if we can't, Dominic asked quietly. Carter's jaw tightened. Then we make sure Elena Kovac never hurts anyone again, permanently. For the first time since seeing the video, Dominic felt something other than helpless rage. It wasn't hope he'd learned better than to hope, but it was purpose, a plan, a chance. He looked at Emma's face on his phone screen one more time, memorizing every detail in case it was the last time he saw her alive. Hold on, he whispered to the image. I'm coming. Just hold on. The warehouse was chaos, gunfire, smoke, screams. The FBI's tactical assault had caught Elena's men off guard, but the Russian had prepared for betrayal. Bodies littered the concrete floor, both federal agents and Elena's mercenaries. As the firefight raged, Dominic fought through the carnage with singular focus. He'd taken 3 bullets, one grazing his shoulder, another through his thigh, a third catching his vest, but pain was irrelevant. Only reaching his family mattered. He found them in the back room where Elena had kept them. Marco was cutting Emma's zip ties while 2 agents shielded Luca and Sofia. The children were alive, traumatized but breathing, and for one perfect moment Dominic thought they'd won. Then Elena Kovac appeared in the doorway. Blood soaked her left side where Detective Carter had shot her, but her right hand still gripped that hunting knife with deadly intent. Her platinum hair hung wild around her face, her ice blue eyes blazing with the fury of someone who'd lost everything and wanted to take the world down with her. You think you've won? She spat, raising the knife. If I can't have my victory, I'll settle for your pain. She lunged not at Dominic, but at Emma, who was closest and still disoriented from captivity. The blade gleamed in the harsh fluorescent light, aimed directly at Emma's heart. No! Dominic moved on pure instinct, throwing himself between them. The knife plunged into his abdomen, the blade sinking deep. White-hot agony exploded through his core, but Dominic's hands shot up, catching Elena's wrists before she could twist the weapon. Doom! Emma's scream tore through the chaos, raw and desperate and full of the terror she'd kept buried for the children's sake. Blood poured from the wound, hot and fast, soaking through Dominic's shirt, but his grip on Elena didn't falter. He'd survived assassination attempts, knife fights, the loss of his wife. He'd survived watching his children suffer and believing he'd never feel whole again. He wasn't dying now, not when he'd just gotten everything back. You killed Isabella, Dominic growled, his hands shifting from Elena's wrists to her throat. "You tortured my children. You threatened the woman I love." Elena's eyes widened as his fingers tightened, cutting off her air. She clawed at his hands, drawing blood, but Dominic's grip was iron forged in rage and desperation. "You wanted to watch me choose?" Dominic's voice was barely human. "I choose them alive and you dead." He squeezed harder. Elena's face turned purple, her struggles weakening. Around them, the firefight had ceased. FBI agents and remaining mercenaries alike, frozen by the primal brutality of Dominic Russo, strangling the life from Elena Kovac with his bare hands while bleeding out from a gut wound. "Boss, that's enough," Marco shouted. "She's done." But Dominic didn't stop until Elena went completely limp. Unconscious or dead, he didn't care which. He released her, letting her body crumple to the floor, and turned toward Emma and his children. 3 steps. That's as far as he made it. His legs gave out, the adrenaline finally failing, leaving only blood loss and agony. Dominic collapsed, his vision graying at the edges. Strong hands caught him, Marco, lowering him carefully to the concrete. "Stay with me, boss," Marco commanded, pressing frantically against the stomach wound. Blood pulsed between his fingers. Too much, too fast. Emma dropped to her knees beside Dominic, her hands joining Marco's in a desperate attempt to stop the bleeding. Tears streamed down her face, mixing with the blood covering them both. "Don't you dare," Emma sobbed. "Don't you dare leave me, Dominic Russo. You promised. You said you weren't easy to kill." Dominic's hand found her face, his bloody fingers gentle against her cheek. His gray eyes, already clouding, locked onto her blue ones. And he smiled. Actually smiled. "I saved you," he whispered, his voice fading. "All of you. That's all that matters. Daddy." Sophia's voice cut through, and suddenly both children were there. Luca's small hands grabbing his father's, Sophia pressing her face against his chest despite the blood. "Don't leave us again," Luca begged, words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "Please, Daddy, don't leave. We need you. I need you." "So strong," Dominic murmured, his eyes struggling to focus on his son's face. "Both of you. So strong, like your mother. Like Emma." His breathing was becoming shallow, labored. Marco shouted for medics, his voice cracking with panic rare for the hardened soldier. "Emma," Dominic said, each word costing him. "Take care of my children. Promise me. You'll take care of them yourself," Emma insisted fiercely, pressing harder against the wound even as blood continued to flow. "The ambulance is coming. You're going to be fine. We're all going to be fine. Love you," Dominic breathed, his eyes on Emma's face like she was the last beautiful thing he'd see. "All of you. My family. Finally got my family back." His eyes closed. "Dominic!" Emma screamed, shaking him. "No, stay with us, please." Marco checked for a pulse, his face stark white. He's still breathing, barely. "Where the hell are the paramedics?" Footsteps thundered as EMTs rushed in with a stretcher. They worked with practiced efficiency, stabilizing Dominic enough to move him, starting an IV as they ran for the ambulance. Emma clutched Luca and Sophia as they watched the ambulance doors close on Dominic's unconscious form. Detective Carter appeared beside them, his expression grim. "He saved all of you," Carter said quietly. "That counts for something." Elena Kovac was being loaded into a second ambulance under heavy guard, alive but unconscious, her throat severely damaged. Justice would come for her in a federal court. But as Emma watched the first ambulance speed away, sirens wailing into the gray Chicago dawn, she didn't care about justice or revenge or anything except the man who'd stepped between her and death without hesitation. "He has to live," Emma whispered, holding the children close. "He has to," but no one could promise her that. All they could do was hope and pray that love was worth the terrible price they might all have to pay. The waiting room at Chicago General Hospital became a purgatory of fluorescent lights and antiseptic smell. 8 hours. That's how long the surgeon said it would take if Dominic survived at all. Emma sat between Luca and Sophia on uncomfortable plastic chairs, still wearing clothes stiff with Dominic's blood. The hospital had offered her scrubs to change into, but she'd refused. Changing felt like giving up, like accepting that the blood was real and Dominic might not make it. Marco paced despite the bullet wound in his shoulder that a nurse had stitched up an hour ago. He'd refused pain medication, needing to stay alert. 2 FBI agents stood guard at the entrance, ostensibly for protection. But everyone knew they were really there to arrest Dominic the moment he woke up. If he woke up. Bianca Russo had arrived 90 minutes into the surgery, Dominic's mother moving like a ghost through the waiting room. At 62, she was still elegant, but grief had carved lines deep into her face, first from losing her husband to violence, then her daughter-in-law, and now possibly her son. She sat beside Emma without speaking, her hand finding Emma's and squeezing. Two women who loved Dominic Russo, bonded by terror and hope. Luca had barely moved since they arrived. Someone had given him a sketch pad and colored pencils, standard hospital tools for traumatized children, and he'd been drawing for hours. Sophia had cried herself to sleep against Emma's shoulder, occasionally whimpering daddy in her exhausted slumber. Emma watched Luca's small hands move across the paper with fierce concentration. She couldn't see what he was drawing, but the colors he chose gave her fragile hope, bright blues and yellows and reds, not the blacks and grays of his trauma art. The 5th hour crawled by. Then the 6th. Emma's legs went numb from sitting, but she didn't move, terrified that if she shifted position, changed anything about this moment, the universe would tip the wrong way, and Dominic would die. Marco finally collapsed into a chair, his tough guy facade cracking. "He's survived worse," he said to no one in particular. 3 assassination attempts, car bomb in '98, that knife fight in New York that should have killed him. Dominic Russo doesn't die easy. "He lost so much blood," Emma whispered. "I felt it pouring out. I couldn't stop it." "You kept pressure on the wound," Marco said firmly. "The paramedics said you probably added 20 minutes to his life." 20 minutes that might make the difference. Hour 7. Emma's phone buzzed a text from the hospital social worker checking on the children. She ignored it. Nothing mattered except the surgery doors and whether the doctor who emerged would deliver life or death. Luca suddenly held up his drawing. "Look," he said quietly. Emma's breath caught. The picture showed 4 figures, a tall man, a woman, and 2 children. They were holding hands in front of a house, and the sun shone overhead. The man was smiling, healthy, whole. Above them in child's handwriting, "Daddy comes home." "It's what's going to happen," Luca said, with the absolute certainty only children possess. "I drew it, so it has to be real." Sophia woke up, rubbing her eyes. "Is Daddy done with surgery?" "Not yet, sweetheart," Emma said, pulling both children close. Finally, after 8 hours and 17 minutes, the surgical doors opened. A doctor emerged. Dr. Patricia Chen, still in blood-stained scrubs, exhaustion etched into every line of her face. Emma stood so fast she nearly fell. Marco caught her elbow, steadying her. "How is he?" Emma asked, the words barely audible. "Doctor." Chen's expression was carefully neutral, the face doctors learned when they delivered news that could shatter or save lives. The knife perforated his small intestine and nicked his hepatic artery. He lost 4 pints of blood. The surgery was complicated. "But," Marco pressed, "but he's alive. He's out of immediate danger, though the next 48 hours are critical. If he develops infection or internal bleeding, we'll have to operate again. But for now..." "Doctor," Chen allowed herself a small smile. "Mr. Russo appears to be as stubborn about dying as his file suggests." Emma collapsed back into the chair, sobs tearing from her throat, relief and terror and exhaustion all crashing down at once. Bianca wrapped her arms around her, crying too. Luca held up his drawing like a talisman that had worked. Sophia whispered, "Thank you," over and over to every god she could remember. "When can we see him?" Emma asked when she could speak again. "He's in recovery now. Another hour, then immediate family only." Dr. Chen glanced at Emma. "You're listed as his fiancé?" Emma touched the ring still on her finger, crusted with blood. "Yes, then you and the children can see him first. But only briefly, he needs rest." As Dr. Chen walked away, Detective Carter stepped forward from where he'd been waiting in the corner. His expression was conflicted relief and duty warring on his face. "Miss Hayes," Carter said quietly, "I'm glad Russo pulled through, truly. But you need to understand when he's cleared by doctors, he's under arrest. He made a deal, his freedom for your lives." Emma's tears dried instantly, replaced by steel. "You're going to arrest a man who almost died saving his children?" "I'm going to arrest a man who's committed dozens of felonies," Carter corrected, but his voice held no triumph. Russo knew the terms. He accepted them. Marco stepped forward, his good hand clenching into a fist. "He just saved federal witnesses and helped you catch Elena Kovac. That counts for nothing?" "It counts for me recommending leniency," Carter said. "But the law is the law. When Dominic Russo wakes up, he faces justice. That was the deal." Emma looked at her engagement ring, at the children who'd just gotten their father back only to face losing him again, at Marco whose loyalty might cost him everything. "How long?" she asked. "How long until you take him?" Carter's jaw tightened. 48 hours. Until the doctors clear him. Then he's mine. 2 days. Emma had 2 days to figure out how to save the man who'd saved her, or watch him sacrifice his freedom for love. The question was, which was the greater, prison bars and concrete, or a life without the people you loved? 3 months had passed since the warehouse. 3 months of Dominic recovering in a hospital room with an FBI guard at the door, then being transferred to county jail once doctors cleared him. 3 months of Emma bringing Luca and Sophia for supervised visits through bulletproof glass, watching their father in an orange jumpsuit, trying to explain why Daddy couldn't come home. Now, the day of reckoning had arrived. The federal courthouse was packed. Media crews lined the steps outside the trial of Dominic Russo, one of Chicago's most notorious crime bosses, was front-page news. Inside, courtroom 5A held its breath as the defendant entered. Dominic looked thinner, the prison food and stress carving hollows into his face, but he walked straight-backed, hands cuffed in front, his gray eyes scanning the gallery until they found Emma, Luca, and Sophia in the front row. He smiled just for them before taking his seat at the defense table. Judge Margaret Thompson, a stern woman of 60 with 30 years on the bench, called the court to order. The charges were read: racketeering, money laundering, illegal weapons trafficking, conspiracy to commit murder, leading a criminal organization. Each charge carried years, potentially decades, in federal prison. "How does the defendant plead?" Judge Thompson asked. Dominic stood. "Guilty, Your Honor, to all charges." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Guilty pleas eliminated the trial's drama, but sentencing still mattered, the difference between dying in prison or potentially seeing freedom again. The prosecution called witnesses first. Former associates testified about Dominic's criminal empire, painting a picture of a man who'd ruled Chicago's underworld with calculated violence for 15 years. Then Detective Carter took the stand. "Detective," the prosecutor began, "you've been investigating Dominic Russo for 5 years. Would you say he's dangerous?" "Yes," Carter answered without hesitation. "A threat to society?" "He was," Carter said carefully, "but I need to add context." The prosecutor frowned. "Detective, 3 months ago, Dominic Russo provided intelligence that helped us capture Elena Kovac, a Russian operative responsible for at least 12 murders on U.S. soil. He risked his life, nearly died, saving 3 hostages. That matters." Judge Thompson leaned forward. "Detective Carter, are you testifying for the defense?" "I'm testifying to the truth, Your Honor. Russo is guilty, but he's also the reason Elena Kovac is facing life in prison instead of still killing people." When Emma was called to the stand, she wore a simple navy dress and her engagement ring, a quiet statement that she stood by Dominic despite everything. "Miss Hayes," Dominic's defense attorney began, "how long have you known the defendant?" 6 months. "And in that time, what have you observed about his character?" Emma looked directly at the jury. "I've seen a man who lost everything and blamed himself, a man who pushed away his traumatized children because facing them meant facing his own pain. But I've also seen him change. Completely. How so?" Dominic learned to be a father again. He learned that strength isn't just about power and control, it's about vulnerability and love. His children couldn't speak for 2 years after their mother died. Now they sing, they laugh, they heal, because he chose them over everything else, including his freedom. "Some would say his criminal activities make him unfit to be a father," the prosecutor interjected during cross-examination. Emma's eyes flashed. "Some would say a man who throws himself on a knife to save his children proves exactly what kind of father he is." The courtroom was silent. As Emma stepped down, Luca suddenly stood. His small voice cut through the quiet. "Your Honor, can I say something?" Judge Thompson looked surprised. "Young man, this isn't, please," Luca interrupted, his voice stronger now. "I need to say something about my dad." The judge hesitated, then nodded. A bailiff brought a microphone to Luca's seat. The boy stood on his chair so everyone could see him, Sophia gripping his hand for support. "My name is Luca Russo," he said, and the courtroom collectively held its breath, a 10-year-old child testifying at his father's trial. 2 years ago, my mom died. Someone blew her up because they wanted to hurt my dad. After that, I stopped talking. For 2 whole years, I didn't say one word because everything hurt too much. Tears streamed down several jurors' faces. My dad hurt too, Luca continued. He didn't know how to help us because he was too broken himself. But then Miss Emma came, and she taught us music. And slowly Dad started coming back. Not the scary boss everyone talks about, just my dad. The dad who plays piano with me, even though he's bad at it. The dad who tells me I'm brave when I'm scared. The dad who almost died saving me. His voice cracked. I know my dad did bad things. I'm not stupid. But people can change, right? That's what Miss Emma says. She says broken things can be fixed if you're willing to try. My dad is trying so hard, and if you take him away forever, you're not just punishing him, you're punishing me and Sophia too. Luca looked directly at Judge Thompson. My dad already lost 2 years with us. Please don't make him lose more. We need him. I need him. The boy sat down, Sophia throwing her arms around him. Throughout the courtroom, people openly wept, hardened reporters, cynical court officers. Even the prosecutor looked shaken. Finally, Judge Thompson asked, Mr. Russo, do you have anything to say before I pass sentence? Dominic stood, his voice steady. I did everything the prosecution says and worse. I don't deserve mercy, but my children do. They deserve a father who's trying to be better. If you send me to prison, and you should, I'll serve every day, knowing it's the price for the choices I made. But I'm asking you, begging you, to give me a chance to eventually come home to them. That's all. The courtroom was silent as Judge Thompson reviewed her notes. Minutes stretched like hours. Dominic Russo, she finally said, you've committed serious crimes that demand serious consequences. The prosecution recommends 25 years. However, I'm taking into account your cooperation with federal authorities, your genuine remorse, and the testimony about your transformation as a father. She paused. I'm sentencing you to 12 years in federal prison, with the possibility of parole after 8 years for good behavior. You'll serve this time at a medium security facility, with provisions for family visits. I'm also mandating therapy and requiring you to testify against remaining members of Elena Kovac's organization. 12 years. Not life, but still a lifetime to children. Emma's hand flew to her mouth, torn between relief and devastation. Dominic turned to his family. I'll come home, he mouthed to Luca and Sophia. I promise. As bailiffs led him away, Luca held up the drawing he'd made months ago, the family holding hands, together and whole. 8 years, Daddy, he called. We'll wait 8 years. Dominic nodded, tears streaming down his face, and disappeared through the door. Justice had been served. But for the Russo family, the hardest wait was just beginning. 1 week after the sentencing, the federal prison chapel became the most unlikely wedding venue in Chicago. The room was stark, gray walls, metal folding chairs, a small podium where a prison chaplain stood waiting. Guards lined the perimeter, their presence a constant reminder that this celebration was bounded by concrete and razor wire. Emma arrived wearing a simple white dress she'd bought off the rack at a department store. She'd considered wearing something else. Wearing white to marry a man in prison felt absurd, but Luca had begged her to look like a real bride, so she wore white. Her dark hair swept up. Her mother's pearl necklace, the only jewelry besides the engagement ring she'd worn for 3 months. Marco escorted her down the short aisle, his arm supporting her trembling form. Bianca sat in the front row, holding Luca and Sophia close. A handful of others had been permitted to attend, a few of Dominic's most loyal men, Detective Carter surprisingly among them, his presence a complex acknowledgement of respect earned through sacrifice. Then Dominic entered, flanked by guards. He wore the standard orange prison jumpsuit, his hands cuffed in front. The prison had denied his request to wear civilian clothes. Regulations were regulations, even for weddings. But when his eyes met Emma's, when he saw her walking toward him in white, his face transformed with such pure love that the orange uniform ceased to matter. The chaplain began. We are gathered here under unusual circumstances to witness the union of Dominic Russo and Emma Hayes. Unusual was an understatement, but as Emma took her place beside Dominic, as a guard removed his cuffs long enough for him to hold her hands, nothing felt unusual. It felt inevitable, like every painful step of their journey had been leading to this moment. The couple has prepared their own vows, the chaplain said. Dominic's voice was rough with emotion. Emma, I can't give you a normal life. I can't give you a house with a white picket fence or Sunday mornings sleeping in. For the next 8 years, God willing, only 8, I can give you supervised visits twice a week and phone calls that get disconnected after 15 minutes. His grip on her hands tightened. But I can promise that every single day I'm in here, I'll be working to become the man you deserve. I'll take every class, every therapy session, every chance to be better. Because you didn't just save my children's lives. You saved mine. You made me want to be worthy of love again. Tears streamed down his face. I promise to love you through these walls and beyond them. I promise to come home to you. And I promise that when I finally walk free, I'll spend the rest of my life making up for the years I stole from us. Emma could barely speak through her tears. Dominic, the first time I saw you, I thought you were the most dangerous man I'd ever met, and you were dangerous to my carefully built walls, to my fear of loving again, to every excuse I'd made for why I didn't deserve happiness. She touched his scarred cheek with trembling fingers. You taught me that broken people can heal each other. That love doesn't have to end in tragedy. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose to hope despite everything telling you not to. Her voice broke. I don't know how I'm going to survive 8 years without you. But I know I'll survive them because you gave me a family to live for, a reason to be strong. I promise to take care of Luca and Sophia. I promise to wait however long it takes. And I promise that when you come home, we'll build the life we should have had all along. The chaplain produced 2 rings, Dominic's, a simple gold band, and Emma's wedding ring, matching her engagement ring. May I see Emma's ring? The chaplain asked. Emma held it up, and Dominic's breath caught. Inside the band, she'd had words engraved. Always waiting. Emma, Dominic whispered. You didn't have to. Yes, I did, she said firmly, because that's exactly what I'll be doing. Waiting for you, believing in you, loving you. With shaking hands, they exchanged rings. The metal felt warm against Dominic's finger, his first jewelry besides the prison ID bracelet. By the power vested in me by the state of Illinois, the chaplain said, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. The kiss was gentle and desperate all at once, a promise and a goodbye compressed into one moment. Emma's hands framed Dominic's face, memorizing the feel of him, knowing it would have to sustain her through countless lonely nights. When they parted, both were crying. So was everyone in the chapel, hardened criminals and federal officers alike, united by the tragedy of love in impossible circumstances. Dominic turned to where Luca and Sophia stood with Bianca. He dropped to his knees on the cold chapel floor, bringing himself to his children's eye level. Come here, he said, and they ran to him, crashing into his arms. Daddy's married now, Sophia said through tears. Emma's really our mom. She is, Dominic confirmed, looking up at Emma with eyes full of love and pain. And she's going to take such good care of you while I'm gone. 8 years, Luca said, his voice firm despite the tears. You'll be good and get parole in 8 years, and then you'll come home. Dominic pulled back to look at both children. I will be home in 8 years. I promise you. When you're 18, when you're graduating high school, I will be there. Will you wait for me? Forever, Sophia whispered. However long it takes, Luca added. Dominic held his children, his wife standing behind them, her hands on their shoulders, completing the circle, and let himself break. He'd held it together through the arrest, the trial, the sentencing. But here, in this moment of profound love and profound loss, he finally let the tears fall. I love you all so much, he choked out. More than my own life. Never forget that. Time's up, a guard said quietly, almost apologetically. The family clung together for 5 more seconds. 10, 20, the guard looking away, giving them what mercy he could. Then Dominic kissed Emma one last time, touched each child's face, and stood. The guard replaced his cuffs. 8 years, Dominic said, walking backward so he could keep looking at his family. I'll see you in 8 years. We'll be here every visiting day, Emma promised. Every single one. As the door closed behind Dominic, Emma collapsed into Marco's arms, finally allowing herself to fully feel the grief of a wedding that was also a funeral for the life they should have had. But through her tears, she looked at Luca and Sophia and saw their determined faces. They would wait. They would hope. They would become the family Dominic was sacrificing everything to deserve. 8 years. It was a lifetime in a blink. They would survive it together. They had to. 8 years later. The morning of August 15th, 2033, dawned clear and bright over Chicago. Emma stood at the prison gates at 5 a.m., though Dominic wouldn't be released until 8. She couldn't sleep anyway, hadn't slept properly in 8 years, if she was honest. Beside her stood 2 young adults who barely resembled the traumatized 10-year-olds from that terrible day. Luca, now 18, had grown tall and lean, his mother's features softened by his father's strength. He wore jeans and a Juilliard hoodie, the prestigious music school where he'd earned a full scholarship for piano performance. The shy boy who couldn't speak had become a young man whose compositions were already gaining attention in classical music circles. Sophia stood without her leg brace for the first time in her life. 3 surgeries over the past 8 years, paid for by the legitimate business Emma had built from Dominic's legal holdings, had corrected her disability. She walked with only the slightest limp now, and her art bold, colorful pieces that spoke of trauma transformed into beauty sold in galleries across the country. Her Instagram had 200,000 followers who called her an inspiration. What if he doesn't recognize us? Sophia asked nervously, fidgeting with her camera. She documented every visiting day, creating a visual timeline of their wait. He'll recognize us, Emma said, though her own heart hammered. 8 years of twice-weekly visits, monitored phone calls, and letters couldn't prepare you for this, for him coming home, really home, forever. At 8 o'clock exactly, the prison doors opened. Dominic Russo walked out a free man. He'd aged 45 now, with silver threading through his dark hair and new lines carved by time and regret around his eyes. Prison had made him leaner, harder in some ways, but his eyes held something they hadn't before. Peace, maybe, or redemption earned through 8 years of therapy, education, and becoming the man he'd promised to be. He saw them and stopped, his breath catching. Then he ran. Emma met him halfway, and when their arms wrapped around each other, 8 years of loneliness shattered like glass. They kissed desperate and tender and real, while Luca and Sofia waited, giving their parents this moment. "You waited," Dominic whispered against Emma's lips. "You really waited." "I promised," Emma said, showing him the ring she'd worn every single day. "Always waiting, and now I'm done waiting. You're home." Dominic pulled back to look at his children, no longer children but young adults. "Look at you," he breathed. "Both of you." "Hi, Dad," Luca said, and his voice was deep, confident, whole. "Welcome home." Dominic pulled them both into his arms, the 4 of them standing in the parking lot as the sun rose higher, a family reunited. The homecoming breakfast was held at the mansion unchanged in 8 years, except now it breathed with life instead of death. Marco had maintained it, ensuring Dominic would return to a home, not just a house. Luca led his father to the piano, the same piano where everything had begun. "I wrote something," he said shyly. "For today." His fingers touched the keys, and music poured out a composition that started with minor chords, dark and painful, then slowly transformed into something major, bright, hopeful. The melody told their story: loss, pain, healing, hope, love. When it ended, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. "That's called 8 years, Luca said. "It's my graduation present to you, Dad, because you graduated too, from who you were to who you became." Dominic couldn't speak, could only pull his son into a crushing embrace. At breakfast, they sat together at the same table where everything had changed 8 years ago. Emma made pancakes terrible, lumpy ones because she'd never learned to cook well, and Dominic ate every bite like they were the finest meal on earth. "What now?" Sofia asked. "What do we do now that we're all together?" Dominic looked around the table at the family he'd nearly destroyed, then saved, then nearly lost again. Emma, who'd waited 8 years for a promise. Luca, who'd turned his trauma into art. Sofia, who'd transformed her disability into strength. "Now," Dominic said, his voice thick with emotion. "Now we live. We make up for lost time. We be the family we always should have been." He reached across the table, taking Emma's hand. "I spent 15 years building an empire of fear and violence. Then I spent 8 years in prison learning that real power isn't about control, it's about love. You can't control love. You can only surrender to it, protect it, honor it." His eyes met each of theirs. "I destroyed lives for years. I hurt people, ruined families, spread pain. But you 3, you taught me that redemption isn't about forgetting what you've done. It's about spending the rest of your life creating more good than the evil you caused. That's what I intend to do." "We'll do it together," Emma said. "As a family." "As a family," they echoed. This story reminds us that no one is beyond redemption. Dominic Russo started as a man consumed by violence and grief, but through love, Emma's patience, his children's forgiveness, his own willingness to change, he found his way back to humanity. We learn that healing takes time. 8 years in prison, yes, but also 8 years of Emma building a life, of Luca and Sofia growing despite their pain, of a family proving that love can survive even the longest separations. We learn that broken people can heal each other if they're brave enough to try. Emma was shattered by abuse and loss, Dominic by guilt and violence, the children by trauma. But together, they created something stronger than any of them could alone. Most importantly, we learn that it's never too late to choose love over fear, hope over despair, change over comfort. Dear viewers, thank you for joining us on this emotional journey through the Russo family's story of pain, redemption, and ultimate healing. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel so you never miss our daily stories that explore the depths of human emotion and the power of love. Hit that like button if you believe in second chances and redemption. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to change, to heal, to love again. We'd love to hear from you. How did this story make you feel? Have you ever had to wait years for someone you love? Do you believe people like Dominic can truly change? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspectives from deep within your heart help our community grow stronger together. Does this story connect to your own life experiences? Have you witnessed redemption in someone close to you? Your stories matter to us, and we read every single comment. As we close this chapter of the Russo family, remember, love is the most powerful force in the universe. It can break through prison walls, heal childhood trauma, and transform monsters into men. Whatever you're facing today, grief, regret, fear, loneliness, know that change is possible. Healing is possible. Love is always possible. We wish everyone watching this video good health, joyful days, and peaceful hearts. May you find the courage to love deeply, forgive completely, and believe that tomorrow can be better than yesterday. Thank you for being part of our community. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Goodbye, and we'll see you in the next video.